Hello everyone, welcome to another Rick's Picks. Today I'm going to be doing my review of the Ghostbusters Frozen Empire movie. Alright, now there will be spoilers in this talk, so if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want to know any spoilers, then wait until after you see the movie to see this review. If you don't care about spoilers, well, then this is going to be the review for you. So I got to see it this weekend and I did enjoy this movie, okay? I do believe that there were some need for improvement. It wasn't a perfect movie, but I feel like it was good for what it was. Overall, I enjoyed it. I think there's a lot of stuff in the movie that shouldn't have been in there, that, they just tried to do too much with it. As for the cast, I felt like the cast, for the most part, was well placed. I feel like they did what they could with each character. All the actors and actresses did really well. I had no problems with anybody who's in the movie. So let's talk about this film for a little bit. So first off, it opens up with the old Ghostbusters firehouse, but it's before it became the Ghostbusters firehouse. It was like back in, I forget what year it was, but it was an old building, old firehouse. So firefighters leave the building to go to a scene that they thought was a fire, but it was really a frozen room. Now you got a whole room full of people who are frozen in ice. And this is a creepy scene. I mean, it's really dark, it's really creepy. There's one guy, they had an old phonograph in there, and his hand was still turning the wheel, but it was no longer connected to his wrist. So, it was a really dark and creepy scene, okay? But what makes it worse is, they started playing the thing. It started opening up, the little orb thing that was supposed to keep the monster in it, and somebody was in the corner holding it. And then when the orb opened a little bit, everybody shattered. So I think this is the first Ghostbuster movie that I can recall that people actually died in it. Because this whole scene, everybody who was frozen in that room was shattered. They were killed. So I thought this was a great mood setter for this movie. It kind of gives you a little bit of a feel of what kind of tone you're going to get from this. All right, so now they come back to the future. The Spanglers, they're all, doing Ghostbusting stuff now. I think I would have liked to have seen more of them coming to the place. They just started out as they're already in New York, they're busting ghosts. No explanation why they left where they were living. No explanation to why they're the ones doing it and not somebody else. It's just the family going and busting ghosts. All right, and in doing so, now this is the scene, you've seen it in all the trailers, where they're driving through New York, they're chasing the the sewer serpent type creature, shooting proton beams at it and the whole 9 yards, doing damage the whole 9 yards. They finally catch it, and now they're up in front of the mayor. The mayor is none other than Walter Peck. For all of us who remember the original movie, he was the EPA guy that had issues with the Ghostbusters. But, in all honesty, in the first movie, and I'm probably going to be doing a review on the first movie eventually, he was kind of right in his way because, Bateman was a real dick to him in the beginning, so I can understand why he was a jerk back. But that's for another review. So he is now mayor. They go up before him, and he brings up some good points. They did a lot of damage, vehicles were injured, and not only that, you're putting a minor in harm's way because Phoebe is only 16. So he said, hey, look, she can't do this with you anymore. She's too young. It'd be like, having a 16-year-old become a cop with a gun. And in all honesty, it made sense. His, criticisms all made sense. Now, in the comic books, if you ever read the Ghostbuster comic books, Walter Peck was still part of the EPA, but he was also regulating what the Ghostbusters did, say, hey, look, this isn't safe, this is safe. So, he kind of still is filling that role, but instead of still being part of EPA, he is now the mayor. Now, one thing I noticed about this movie is there's a lot of references to the old Ghostbusters cartoon. All right, a lot of member berries for that. Yes, there are some from the original movies, like they did show, you know, the Statue of Liberty walking from the end of Ghostbusters 2. You know, there's all the fanfare that you've seen in the commercials, which we'll go over that in a little bit. But the one thing about the Walter Peck character is I feel like he should have only had this scene. There was 3 scenes with him in it. We'll get into that as we get further into the movie. But I feel like this is the only scene that he really needed to be in. Because one of the things I feel is a big issue with this movie is that they threw too much at you. And if they would trim some of this other stuff down, you can really get more into the storyline. You know, they could make other things work harder on things that were more important to the storyline than, you know, some of these side adventures and member berries and whatever. So I feel like this is the only scene in this movie where he had any real relevance. I think they should have just left him here and then didn't do the other 2 scenes with him. So obviously at this point, Phoebe is upset. She's upset because, you know, she's the smarter of the family. What's his name? Guy, played by Paul Rudd, is now part of the family. Okay, him and the mother are now officially dating, and I like his angle with his character, and I wish they would have did a little bit more with this. He is the confused stepfather. Okay, he doesn't know what exactly his role is to these children. You know, he's trying to be the good friend and stuff, but he doesn't know how far he can go to disciplining them, which is a real good aspect, and it's a realistic one too, because I hear that a lot of step parents have issues with that, to where, okay, hey, look, I'm now part of family, but what are my limits? What are my regulations? Can I yell at them? Will I get in trouble for yelling at them? So I feel like this was a really good character development for him. It showed that, hey, look, he's trying to integrate into this family. Now, of course, the mother gives him the green light to say, hey, look, if you need to, you know, discipline my children, do what you got to do. Because they had a little fight about, you know, him, you know, her trying to stand her ground with Phoebe, but he wasn't backing her up. He's like, look, why didn't you back me up? He's like, I don't know where I stand with this. I don't know what I can do, what I can't do. So she gave him full reins to, you know, be a father figure. All right. So you have that demand. Now, the thing I have a slight issue with this is, okay, Phoebe can't go out on Ghostbusting anymore. And it's because of the fact that she's basically handling a weapon. All right, those proton packs, yes, they are designed to capture ghosts, but they can do a whole lot of damage, as we've seen in every movie up to this one. So it's understandable that a 16-year-old cannot be handling essentially a weapon. But there's always other things she could do around the ghost house, and they made it feel like there was nothing she could do. And as a teenager, or as anybody, I can understand her feelings like, look, you know, you're a part of this. This whole thing is because of you, and, you know, now you're sidelined. You can't do any of the stuff you want to do. So, of course, she's going to be aggravated. She's going to be angsty about it, you know, and I understand that. So, later on, we are now she's out moping, okay, and we're introduced to a ghost figure. All right, she's out there playing the chess thing, which started up her relationship with her grandfather, Egon, because his ghost played chess with her. So now you get this other ghost girl that shows up. Now, I know there's controversy about this ghost girl, okay? Some people are like, oh, I don't know why they put this in there. Oh, man, they're having, you know, this kind of relationship, which is a lesbian. It's hinted at, but it isn't. All right? But a lot of people feel like this shouldn't have been in it. I kind of disagree. It's part of the storyline. And I think my problem with this relationship is they didn't do more with it. Okay? Yes, the relationship is basically the relationship from Casper the movie. All right? You know, you got the ghost figure, you got the human figure, and they're kind of, you know, whether it be best friend relationship, an intimate relationship, whatever way they were going to go, that's irrelevant. What's relevant was these two characters were building a relationship. And then a little bit further along, you find out that she's working for the head ghost. And they don't really do much with this. And that's what is disturbing about this storyline, because it's the standard, you know, one person sent to infiltrate, they become good friends with somebody, and then they have a moral dilemma. You know, should I betray these people? Should I listen to my boss? Should I, you know, whatever. So it's that classic storyline that they're using with this ghost girl. but they didn't do anything to build up to what it led to. All right, because they needed more time with these characters. I felt like we needed more time with the ghost girl trying to trick Phoebe and trying to, as she gets to know her, trying to trick her into what the head ghost wanted her to do. Okay, and they didn't really do much with that. They had a scene where they're in the diner. Phoebe decides, oh, I'm going to show up with a proton pack with our good buddy, Podcast. She sees the girl in there. She tries to shoot her, busts out a glass, and then no repercussions. Nothing happens with it. Nothing happens with that scene. It just dies. And then the ghost girl shows up at the firehouse and realizes, hey, she's a Ghostbuster. Now, I think that her showing up at the firehouse was a good scene, but they could have left out the diner thing. She could have followed her to the firehouse, and then they could have did all that. She had a really nice monologue about how her family died in a fire. What's it like to go over? Because her whole thing is, like Casper, she had unfinished business, okay? So I feel like there should have been more with this. And like if you took out some of the extra peck scenes, a few other things, I think they could have fleshed this out a little bit more and made it more significant, so when the betrayal does come, it has more weight. All right, but we'll get to that as we get further along in this review. So now Ray is over at Ray Occult. Okay, he has his bookstore, which was in games, and also I believe it was in Extreme Ghostbusters as well. And him and Podcast are doing videos of people bringing in their items. They see if it's possessed or not. And if it's possessed, they keep it. I guess they give people a couple bucks for it, and they keep it. If it isn't possessed, they destroy it. Now, one thing I notice about this movie is a lot of the humor is subtle. It's subtle and quick. And if you blink your eyes, sometimes you miss some of it. Sort of like the original Ghostbusters movie. A lot of the humor in Ghostbusters, you probably didn't get the first time. You get it later on, like subtle hints here, little jokes there, and this movie has that. So I would think if you rewatch it, you'll probably get some of the jokes or notice them a little bit more. So the whole smashing of the thing, and somebody's like, oh my god, why are you doing this? It's like, well, that's what gets us our ratings. And trust me, being an internet person, yeah, I can see how that gets the ratings. So you have this one guy come in, he has the ball, and we all know as the audience that this is the prison for the head bad guy. All right, so Ray takes the PKE meter to it, burns up the PKE meter. Now, burning up the PKE meter is also something from the real Ghostbusters cartoon. I believe it happened a couple of times. The first time I remember it happening was Mrs. Rogers' Neighborhood, where they go to a haunted house that is run by a ghost. And, Egon takes the PKE meter out. He tries to scan the place, and the PKE meter burns up. So I believe that's a reference to that. But, so it burns up the meter. He wants to know where it came from. The guy's like, it was my grandmother's or whatever. And, the guy's obviously shady. He was just trying to sell it to get a buck. He's kind of a con man, but not a good con man because, he tries to hike up the price a little bit more. But, Ray was like, yeah, $50 or whatever. And the guy was happy with it, went away. All right. So this orb broke the meter. All right. And I don't think they gave enough respect to this orb, which I feel like is kind of out of character for Ray, because Ray gets excited about this stuff. He has a lot of respect. Him and Egon, obviously Egon isn't no longer with them. So I would have thought Ray would have put a little bit more effort into this ball. See, now it just went off the chart and burned up the PKE meter. But instead, they take it over to the Ghost Core building. Now, one of the issues they're having is that the containment grid is getting overfilled. All right. So they're like, oh no, the containment grid's getting overfilled. What do we do with this? And then, Winston comes up. He says, well, I'll get my crew on it. And the crew shows up and they say, yeah, it's overfilled. And, well, we're going to let you in on a little secret. We have a spot in an old abandoned aquarium that we are now doing research and development. So, you know, they take the Spangler family over there. Now, my question is, why didn't they tell them this before? You know, why is this all of a sudden sprung on these characters? I feel like that would have been more of something if it was like they just moved in, they're starting to get together, they're starting to get comfortable being Ghostbusters, and, you know, because they just moved in, now they're showing, oh yeah, well, we have the firehouse where you'll be based out, but we have this. But no, it comes in after they've been there for a while, and that's why I feel like I think this movie should have been more of a starter film, to where it would show the family first getting to New York, starting to get comfortable and so forth, instead of them saying they've been, you know, playing it out that they've been there for a while. They're already established, they're hunting ghosts. I think it should have been more of a, hey, you're first getting here, you're settling in, you're first starting to get ghosts. We noticed the containment field is filling up for you. Check this out. Now, something that kind of got me a little bit with this was that they try to play it off like the Ghostbusters always knew that where the firehouse was a hot spot for dimensional doors. So they made it sound like they bought the firehouse because they thought it was a hot spot for, you know, dimensional doors between the ghosts, which is kind of BS because of the fact that in the original movie, the only reason they got the firehouse was because Ray's pretty much a big kid. So, you know, he's like, oh man, it got a pole. Let's try this pole. Let's stay here tonight. You know, that was the whole reason why they got it. Now, what probably would have worked better is if their explanation was, hey, when the firehouse blew up after they turned the grid off, we realized that this was a hot spot for dimensional doors to the other realm. Now, that would make more sense, because then it'd be like, oh, well, that's why we're rebuilding here, because we found out that this was a hot spot instead of always. And that would be, once again, a little bit better of the writing for this movie. So, you know, that was kind of a meh. You know, it aggravated me a little bit, but, you know, it's just, it could have been better writing in my opinion. So, you know, they're finding out that so at the Ghostbusters, you know, core place, they got a young guy there. I don't think I know his name. I don't even think they mentioned his name. He seemed like an interesting character. I hope they do more with him, because he seems like almost like an Egon of the group. You know, smart, maybe not the brightest, but he's still, you know, he's more book smart than street smart. So this guy, he takes the ball, he puts it into the this thing that they have, that what it's designed to do is extract possessed ghosts from an object. So if you have like a haunted Walkman, it'll extract the ghost from it, put it into a containment field. All right. So the whole ghost lab is really cool. I like the whole setup for it, because so they have like 4 or 5 containment grids there at least. They have storage rooms that have like a field around it, so they can, you know, study ghosts. They can put ghosts in them and study them. Like they had this really creepy one. They had this one called a possessor that could bounce from object to object and possess things. They even had the little Stay Puft Marshmallow guys in one and what have you. And all these ghosts are afraid of this ball. So they have the ball. Ray gives it to him. He's like, oh, this set the PKE meter off the chart, and just dumps it on a table, and that's the end of it. And once again, I feel like that's out of character for Ray. You know, I would think that Ray would have been more excited about it. By, wow, this set the thing off the charts. What's this about? Let's do some research on it. That would have been old school Ray. This Ray was kind of like, oh, it set the thing off the chart. Here, take a look at it, and meh. So I felt like that was an out of character thing for Ray to do with this. So they take the thing, they put it into the you know, the machine that extracts the ghosts from the item and puts it into the little containment room so they can suck it into the containment grid. And of course it doesn't work out right, because this thing's a high powered entity in this ball, you know. So because it messes up all the machinery. It cuts the power on what have you, and ghosts are trying to escape. Now I felt like this was a cool, creepy scene, okay, because it was dark. You only have the girl from afterlife. I forget what her name is. The love interest for the brother. And you have the research guy, which, like I said, at this point, I don't think they ever really gave him a name. I think he's just there. So the two of them are alone in this room with this ball that's starting to freeze up, the containment thing. He tries to grab it. It freezes his hand. So you start getting a feeling of dread in this scene, because it's like, oh no, are the ghosts going to get out? Is this ball going to do something? This dude just got injured. And of course, luckily they were able to reboot everything up before most of the ghosts can get out. The only one that got out was the possessor. Okay. But it was a creepy scene because you almost had a fear factor going on there. Like, oh my God, is everything going to escape? It's just the two of us here. We're going to be in trouble. And then, what's this ball doing and what have you. So, yeah, I thought that was a really nice scene. I really liked the, fear factor to it, and what have you. And like I said earlier, the ghosts are all afraid of this ball. They're all scared of it, because one of the things that this, ice death god does is he can control other ghosts, other spirits. So they're all afraid of that, and they don't want him getting control of them. All right, they don't say much about that in the movie, but they make it apparent in certain scenes. Like there's one where they're holding the ball up to the little marshmallow guys, and they're scared, and I think they're trying to attack it or do something to it because they keep on splatting up against it. And then podcast is videotaping why this is doing this, and he finds out that there's some sort of, hidden spiritual message in it, which is common in a lot of real spiritual cases. People will record something and then they'll play it back, and then you get an extra voice, some sort of demonic voice or something. So, just remember, Dan Aykroyd is really into spiritual stuff. That was the whole reason why he did the Ghostbusters movie in the first place. He has a real big thing for, ghost catching, the paranormal phenomenons and stuff like that. Mediums and the whole 9 yards. Like in the original Ghostbusters and everything had a purpose. Everything that was on Ecto-1 had a purpose. Everything about their weapons had a purpose. He really mapped this out. So this would make sense that they would have something like that in the movie. Now, he takes it to Ray. He shows it. Phoebe's there. And the three of them decide, okay, we're going to go to the library and talk to a guy who's a linguistics person. Sorry for mispronouncing that. Because Ray knows it's an older language. He just doesn't know how to cipher it. Now, this is what gets me a little weird, okay? So they're making it sound like these three people shouldn't be doing this. Like they shouldn't be taking this, sound bite over to somebody and doing some research. Now, I don't know why this would be considered a problem. Yes, Peck told Phoebe that she can't do ghost busting. But who's to say she can't do research work? Why can't she do research work? As long as she's not wielding a proton pack or a neutron wand, I don't understand what the issue was here. But they made it sound like it was some old secret, oh man, we gotta be hush-hush because we're not supposed to be doing it, when all they're really doing is some research. Nothing wrong with doing research. I don't know what the problem was with that. So he has his, bike, all right, which I think they called it Ecto-C or something. Is motorcycle with a sidecar. It almost reminds me of the Ecto-2 from the Ghostbuster cartoon, except instead of it turning into a helicopter, it's just a bike with a sidecar. But once again, there's a lot of member berries from this movie for the cartoon. All right, so they get to the library, and of course the library is, I believe it's the one on Fifth Street, the most, the big library that was in the original Ghostbusters movie. They're now here at that one, which it would make sense for them to go. So this member berry makes sense. If you're going to go to do research on something, you would go to the biggest library in New York, which is this one. So that whole thing makes sense why they went there. So they go there. The guy from the first one comes out, oh, you can't be here. Ray's like, hey, yeah, whatever. And, just goes, bypasses them, Yeah, that's a little member berry. That little interchange didn't really need to be there because, it served no purpose. It's just this guy saying, you can't be here, and Ray pretty much, walks past him like he's nothing. So there was no interaction, and it doesn't go anywhere in the story. It's just member berry. That's probably one of the member berries you can do without. Okay, so they go inside, and he has his the guy who's good with languages. I apologize, I can't pronounce it at this moment. So this guy's really good with ancient languages. He's like, hey, look, this ball, I know what it is. We're going to go into the basement of the library where we have all the deep secretive stuff, major archives and what have you. Most libraries and stuff do have something similar to this, so they go down there. They're looking it over. They find it in this big book. And then he explains the story of the frozen death, the evil spirit in this. Now, this scene I thought was really cool, okay? Because as he's explaining it, they're showing, I guess it's like Sanskrit art, that you would normally see on like a wall, like in the pyramids or some sort of ancient society. And they did it as a stop action, or I guess these days it would probably be a CGI animated thing to where they showed it in that Sanskrit, the whole history of how he was like the head ghost for this one guy, and the guy was afraid that this thing would become too powerful, so he decided to stop it in its track, and then he appointed a watcher over it, okay, a fire starter watcher. What counteracts ice is fire, so they have a lineage, a bloodline that will watch over this thing over the years, okay. So that whole explanation thing was really nice. I thought it was really cool looking. I really dig the visuals for that. So they find out that, hey, look, it's this thing, and it emerged earlier in New York history. And they talk a little bit about the opening scene, and that they had a phonograph with a wax recording of the chant that will, release this thing. So they go to listen to this, and they start listening, and then the possessor spirit's there with them, and it freaks out and steals the thing. Now, I can understand why this ghost is stealing it, okay, because they're afraid of this entity. So the possessor is stealing it, not so much to be goofy or funny, but he doesn't want to be controlled by this thing. So he's keeping this audio away from them because he knows what will happen. So Ray and them, they chase him outside of the place. Now, in this scene, they do see the library ghost, okay? Ray's walking through. He sees her. It's just like how you see it in the trailer. She looks at him, he looks at her, turns into the monster ghost, goes at him, and then that's the end of the scene. I like this scene, but I don't like this scene. I think this scene would have been better played if he's walking through the library, he sees her reading, he looks at her, she looks at him, she does the shh thing, and he kind of remembers what happened, ooh, and just keeps on going. I think that would have been a little bit better because we already know that she can turn into this monster ghost thing, but I think it would have been a better scene to where she doesn't turn into it. She gives him the shh, and he knows what would happen if he doesn't, so he kind of skates along, like, ooh, kind of thing. I think that would have been a lot better scene than her actually turning into the monster, but that's just my opinion of it. So back to the chase. They chase this thing out, all right, and it gets the wax thing stuck on one of the lions in front of the library, and then the possessor possesses the lion, and it attacks Ray. And of course, because his bike's a Ghostbuster bike, it has to have secret weapons in it, so they find the secret proton pack, shoots the lion, it explodes, the cops show up, and now Phoebe's in trouble again. Now, this is what doesn't make sense, and this is the second scene with Walter Peck. So now he's like, oh, well, we're going to shut down the Ghostbusters now. You finally gave me the thing I needed to shut you down, blah, 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 blah. This wasn't needed because, yeah, he did shut down the firehouse, but it didn't do nothing. There was no consequences to it. They just walk in, and it's like they didn't even shut it down. So there was no point in shutting it down. Obviously, it was a self-defense scene, you know, because it's getting ready to attack Ray. It's probably going to, you know, do physical harm to him or whatever. So she protected him, and it blew up the statue. Now, the lion statue coming alive is once again another reference to the real Ghostbusters cartoon. Matter of fact, that's also a reference to Mrs. Rogers' Neighborhood, to where she had two lions that were possessed on either side of her house, and they would actually come to life, and the Ghostbusters had to fight them for a brief minute. So that's, once again, another reference to the Ghostbusters cartoon. So, you know, she's in trouble for this. They're shutting down the Ghostbusters. Winston's trying to argue with this guy. And then, you know, he closes it down. But like I said, I feel like this whole scene wasn't really needed. I don't, you know, because there's obviously a self-defense mode. You could see it was. You could see it was attacking Ray. You could see it was off the perch, attacking him, and she was defending herself. So I don't understand what was the problem. I don't even understand what was the problem with them being at the library, because they made it, oh, you guys are at the library, but they're just doing research. There's nothing wrong with just doing research. So they were just put into a position to where she had to protect herself. It was sort of like if you're at a library and you're researching someone, and somebody comes with a gun and tries to, you know, shoot you, and you protect yourself. You weren't expecting this. It had nothing to do with what you were doing. You just had to deal with the situation. I think that's what it was, and I think they overblown that scene just a little bit too much. But, so, you know, they closed down the firehouse. Now, you get, right after Peck has his moment, you get this really nice scene with Ray and Winston. And the two of them are having a, I guess you can say, like an argument. And they're arguing over, what are you going to do for your life? Rest of your life. You know, we're getting too old. We can't do this anymore. And Ray's like, well, I want to do this. I want to do this till I die. This is what I enjoy. This is what I want to do with my retirement. You know, this is something I actually get joy out of. It isn't just something I do for money or whatever. It's something I genuinely enjoy. And even Winston has a little bit of a smile, like, you know, he kind of feels the same way in his own way. You know, but Winston's trying to tell him, hey, look, yeah, you can do it, but you got to do it a little bit different. You're older now. There's certain things you need to do a little bit different. So I thought this was a really, really nice exchange between Ray and Winston. I really liked that conversation between the two of them. You know, it had a feeling of heart between the two. So overall, I liked that exchange with those two characters. So after that, they break into the Ghostbuster, you know, headquarters. You know, like I said, there's nothing to stop them. There's a reference to Afterlife where there's a lock on it, and Mother's like, Phoebe, get the lock, you know. So they break in. No repercussions, no whatever. They're gearing up to fight this ghost guy, all right? So they have a little scene with Phoebe and the ghost girl, okay? So Phoebe's upset because everybody's mad at her because, you know, she isn't supposed to be ghost busting. But she wasn't ghost busting. She was just researching. So there's no real reason to be mad at this character. They're all mad at her for something that was out of her control. All she was doing was some research. A ghost showed up and she protected Ray. So I don't understand the whole argument, but Paul Rudd tries to have a moment with her. He thinks that she's in this office, so he tries to talk to her, but she really wasn't in the office. She was out with Ghost Girl. So now, Ghost Girl, once again, I feel like they should have did more. I think not only should they have like a personal conversation, but they should have had something to where she's trying to get information out of her. Okay, that there should be something to where, yeah, they have their, you know, friend moments, but there should also be something that shows that the ghost girl is trying to get information. She's trying to get something from her. Like, you know, Phoebe might be saying, yeah, well, you know, they don't trust me. They don't believe me. And the ghost girl could be like, yeah, I know, but. And now, what's this about the containment unit? Or what's this about this language thing that you and, you know, Ray were like, they needed to have something to show that she's trying to get information out of her, and they don't do any of that. They don't do any of that because they're too busy, I think, hitting on member berries. Like with Slimer. They have Slimer through the movie, but he's not important to the movie. He has no purpose in this movie other than a cheap, thrill, a cheap one bit at near the end of the movie, and we'll get into that in a minute. Because the brother has been trying to catch Slimer because Slimer's living in the attic of the firehouse, which is once again a Ghostbusters cartoon reference and a Ghostbusters 2 reference. Because in Ghostbusters 2, there was a deleted scene where Louis Telly was chasing Slimer in the ghost house. He was trying to catch him, and, Slimer gets out. But it was a deleted scene, and, so that showed that he was in the ghost house. And also, they did an origin story of Slimer after the fight with Gozer. Slimer stayed at the ghost house because he felt like they were the only people who actually took notice to him. So in that, there was purpose. But even in that, it was kind of like Slimer would show up here, a little there, and be curious about the people in the place. But this was more of he was living under a big ball of trash, and the brother was just trying to catch him. And I just feel like it wasn't needed. The whole Slimer bit really wasn't needed. Actually, what probably would have made it Slimer a little bit better is if he would have showed up out of nowhere to do that extra scene near the end, and we'll get into that as well. Now, something I didn't mention earlier was they did go back to the Indian guy's house. I forget what his name was. And he says, yes, this ball was my aunt's, my grandmother's. She kept it in this special room. There was a couple little, quick jokes here and there over all that. And there's this giant copper or brass room, which looked really cool. It was hidden in there. It looked like the ball belonged in the center. They had the, demon's horns hanging up. And this whole room served as a purpose. They talked a little bit about how the brass keeps the ghost contained, so it can't speak out to other ghosts. It can't do anything. It's almost like its own little containment center, which would make sense because there's a lot of legends about, evil spirits being kept in like sacred temples with certain things around it to keep it from escaping and so forth. So it all made sense. It had his grandmother's armor in the side and what have you. So, so this was a key point to everything. So now back on track, the girl and Phoebe goes to the ghost lab, and they're being intimate. Well, like I said, whether it's meant to be a sexual thing or whether it's meant to be just friends, they're very ambiguous about it, but either way, it's not important. So Phoebe has this cool idea, hey, I'll go into this containment thing, and I believe for 2 minutes, my body would be at a state of arrest while my spirit comes out, and now we can be two spirits together. All right, so what she's doing is a form of astral protection. It doesn't kill her. It just puts her to sleep while her spirit comes out, which would, once again, sounds like a very Dan Aykroyd thing because that goes all into the paranormal stuff and what have you. So I could see that being something that Dan Aykroyd would be about, because in a lot of paranormal stuff, they do say that if you go into sleep and if you know what you're doing, your soul can leave your body, go into the astral plane and what have you. So it makes sense. And then as soon as she comes out, it allows the evil ghost to possess her, because now that her spirit's out of the body, he can possess the spirit and make her body say the chant. Now, this is what I'm talking about how they needed more time with the ghost girl and Phoebe, because of the factor they needed to build up to this. Okay, they needed to build up to him trying to get her to speak the words, because it was like, it didn't have the impact it should have, because there was no build up to it. When you see her going into that room and you see her becoming a ghost, there needs to be something for the audience to feed off of. It's like, okay, she's going into the room, she's going to become a ghost, they're going to have their moment, big whoop. But there should have been something like, oh man, I don't know if this is good idea, because she's trying to manipulate her into trying to say these words. So, so when she does turn into a ghost and she does say the word, there's more of a payoff. but because there was no real good lead up to this, there's no real payoff, if you get what I'm saying. You know, and that's why I felt like these two characters needed more time together. They needed more time together so you could see her trying to weave in, you know, trying to figure out how she can get her to say these magical words. You know, because these magical words was pretty much, it's kind of a ripoff of, if you think about The Evil Dead. You know, where you say the special incantation and it brings the deadites back. Well, in this case, it brings, you know, the frozen death back. So that allows him to be free. And, you know, long story short, that's that whole scene that you see in the trailer where all New York turns into ice. They fight him at the the firehouse. Now, I'm not going to get into too many spoilers in the firehouse scene and stuff, because, you know, if you're just watching this review and you still want to see the movie, even with some spoilers, there's certain parts in that you don't really want to spoil. But overall, I think the fighting scene was a really cool scene. Before all this happens, they feel like Nadeem, who's the Indian guy who sold them the ball, was possessed. So they take him to the ghost lab to figure out what's up with him. And Peter Venkman's there. All right, and he's going to be the one doing the test. They have the old, you know, spaghetti strainer thing that was put on Vincent's head in the original Ghostbusters. They use that for him to see if he's possessed or what have you. So that's another member buried to the old Ghostbusters movie. And Peter does a couple of things that aggravates him, and he notices that a flame next to him gets higher, and they figure out that he isn't possessed. He's part of a bloodline of fire weavers that are supposed to protect the world from the ice demon. Okay, so they start trying to train him, and this is another thing that I think they should have worked on a little bit more, is that I think they should have went a little bit more into a little bit of his training with the Ghostbusters trying to work more. I mean, they did a little thing where they have a candle and a little flame, and they try to get him to move it a little bit. And it was a neat scene, but later on he expresses a lot more ability with it. So I think they should have did a little bit more of maybe a little training montage or something to, you know, kind of get him to a point where it's a little bit more believable when he's a little bit more powerful, you know, in the end fight scene. So the end fight scene, there's a lot of interesting stuff that I feel like they should have did a little bit more. So Phoebe comes up with this idea that, hey, look, if I coat the cyclotron in brass, you know, then it can help us catch it, because they did try catching the evil demon when it broke loose with one of the proton packs, but all he did was freeze the neutron beam, which is really cool. Like, that was a neat scene to where the one girl comes up, she has the proton pack, she fires it at him, and he just freezes the proton right there. You know, the proton stream just in mid-shot and just shatters it. So they know that the protons don't work, but her thing is, hey, if we coat it in brass, you know, we could probably use it to contain him. So everybody's upstairs. They're getting ready to fight the thing. Now, I think they should have put somewhere in the dialogue, them say, okay, what we'll do is we'll hold him off as long as we can while you get this thing ready. You know, I think that should have been in there, because it just seemed like, it just felt like they didn't have a plan when this guy came in. He came in and they all figured, okay, we'll just shoot the wands at him, even though they don't work. But if there was just a little bit of dialogue saying, okay, hey, we're going to hold him off as long as we can with the proton packs until you get yours up to date so we can really catch this thing. So now, having Peter in the lab, I think, was an injustice to his character. I don't think he was needed to be in that lab scene. And the reason why I feel like he shouldn't have been in that lab scene, and maybe they should have had the blonde guy doing the whole experiment, because it would have gave a lot more weight when Peter shows up at the firehouse. Because everybody's there except for Peter. They're all getting ready to fight this thing, and then they think it's coming at the door, and it's Peter Venkman. Now, I think that scene would have had a lot more weight if that was, you know, Peter just showing up in the, that's his first appearance in the movie. Because then that'd be a lot cooler, because the whole movie you don't see Peter, and then he just shows up at the end like, hey, I heard you guys are having some trouble. I'm here to help, instead of having him at the lab. So that's just my personal thoughts on that. So they try to defeat him with the proton packs. Everybody gets frozen. Nadim comes upstairs. He's in his grandmother's armor. He wants to use the Zippo to shoot fire at it. It doesn't work. It breaks open the containment grid. Phoebe comes up. They wind up beating him. Like I said, I'm not going to get into all the details of everything that's going on here, because it was a neat scene. How they how they defeat him. Everybody was involved. Everybody had a part to play. And I kind of think it was cool how they kind of defeated it. But during this, the possessor was here too, and it possesses Ecto-1, and Ecto-1 turns evil. Now, once again, that's a reference to the Ghostbusters cartoon, where they were fighting a entity called Kilowatt, and it possessed Ecto-1 because it can possess electrical and mechanical things. So it possessed Ecto-1. Ecto-1 attacks them in that cartoon. So it was a callback or a member buried to that. And then the possessor's causing havoc throughout, the firehouse. And then it's getting ready to shoot, I think it's Phoebe with a proton pack. And then, Nazim comes in and actually turns the proton beam away from her, which I don't know how that works, because he's I guess more or less a firebender. So I don't understand how he can move protons and neutrons, because that's what the proton beam is. It's a proton and neutron beam that is designed to capture ghosts. So it's not fire, it's not ice, it's not water, but I guess it's to, say, hey, look, he finally has control of his powers. Give him a real, hey, I helped out kind of scene. So the possessor possesses a pizza box, possesses a pizza, and then Slimer comes in and eats them. Now, what I think would have been cool, and once again, this is my personal opinion, is Slimer shouldn't have been in the movie up to this point. I think this point would have had a lot more impact if the pizza starts popping out and then Slimer eats it without being in the movie. So he had a cameo to do this, because, be honest with you, the second I saw that pizza bouncing out of that box, I knew right off the bat Slimer's going to eat it, because Slimer was already in the movie. And we know Slimer eats stuff. So the second it turned into pizza and started bouncing out, we all knew what was going to happen. So I think it would have been a lot more suspenseful if Slimer wasn't in the movie up to this point, and then the pizza bounces out and then Slimer eats it. And I think it would have more of a wow factor, that it would happen then. That would be your first appearance of Slimer. Slimer, eats it and then flies away, and they're like, ooh. And I think that would have had a better use of that character instead of the brother trying to catch it. So after that, Walter Peck shows up. He's all pissed off because, he thinks that they ruined the city, because, Ghostbusters can turn all of New York into ice, because why not? And then, everybody, gangs up on him, and then the media's like, oh, well, you support the Ghostbusters. Oh, I guess I have to. And once again, that's the third scene Peck is in, and I don't feel like it was needed. It wasn't a needed scene. You could have took that time and did a little bit more with the characters than, having him show up and, being mad at them and, what have you. So there was an end credit scene as well. It was a minor scene. It had nothing to do with the plot. It doesn't really open up for another movie. So if you do go see this in the theaters, wait around a couple of minutes to see that end scene. Now, I know this has been a long video. It's a lot of me talking. So overall, I did like the movie. I thought it was fun for what it was. It wasn't as good as the original one. Matter of fact, nothing's going to be that good. That was lightning in a jar. That one's real high off the scale to everything. And it wasn't as bad as the worst one, which we all probably know which one I'm talking about. And that one's so low on the scale, I don't think anything could be that bad. So, overall, I liked it. I feel like if they would have took out some of the scenes of some of the member berries, like the Slimer scenes, two of the Peck scenes, you know, and a few other things, and worked a little bit more on the storyline, like maybe a little bit more with the girl, and well, Phoebe with the ghost, maybe, you know, had a little bit more moment with Nazim, because I would have liked to have seen a scene where when he figures out what he is and what he's capable of, I would have liked to have seen a mourning scene of him. You know, him feeling the weight of this and like, wow, my grandmother always tried to tell me about this, but I never listened. I wish I did. You know, that kind of scene to where the weight hits him and he feels like he could have had a better relationship with his grandmother, and because he wouldn't listen to her, you know, that kind of dynamic. I think that would have been really cool if they would have put a scene like that in there to put the weight onto this character and flesh him out a little bit more. But most of my problems are with the writing. The characters were basically who the characters are, as always, like I said, other than that one thing with Ray. But I can see more movies coming out, and I would like to see Ray and Winston as supporting cast. You know, Ray runs a occult store. You know, if they need help with, like, you know, spiritual stuff, references, they can go to him. If they need financial help, they go to Winston. So they both serve purposes. Peter no longer serves a purpose. He's just a scientist. You know, he was just there because they needed Bill Murray. Like I said, I feel like he would have been better served if he would have showed up at the fire hydrant, and that would have been when we were first introduced to him in this movie. The villain was really cool. He was scary. He was, you know, big and nasty. He wasn't an easy kill. You know, obviously they had to figure out something to beat him. So I like that about it. Essentially, he was an original character. You know, the whole controlling of the ghost thing, that was done in the cartoon as well by Sam Hain, and even the Poltergeist ghost that actually ate. Ooh, man, he would be a cool villain in a movie. But anywho, so, you know, stuff like that. I like the factor that they weren't going as hard on the first movie like Afterlife did. You know, they weren't really hitting the member berries. You know, there's a couple of references here and there. Most of your member berries are from the real Ghostbuster cartoon. There were movie member berries, but I didn't think they were that bad. Where they were put, I think most of them, you know, made sense. So overall, I liked it. I enjoyed it as a movie. I thought it was fun, you know, for what it is. If you're going in there and you're expecting, you know, a rehash of the original Ghostbuster and you're expecting it to be that good, then you're going to be disappointed. If you're kind of seeing it as its own movie, hey, it's just a continuation of the Ghostbuster story, you would probably enjoy it a little bit more. Now, I'm hoping the next movie will be more better written, okay? It's because these last two movies felt like establishing movies, okay? Afterlife felt like they were establishing the new characters. Frozen Empire feels like they're trying to establish where they're at now, okay? So they went from small town to now they're back to New York. So first one established the new characters. Now you got your location. So I'd like to see this new movie be more story, you know, emphasized, because they're already in a new place. All the characters are established. I would like to see it focus a lot more on the 4 new characters, the Spangler family. All right, because Paul Rudd's character just took up the name of Spangler, which I can't blame him. That's better than Gooberman or whatever his name was. So, you know, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun movie. Yes, it had a lot of flaws. Yes, there's things that could have been done better for it. But what it is, it is. So I would probably give it maybe about a 4 out of 5, or maybe a 3.5 out of 5 myself. If you like the Ghostbuster franchise and you can just accept this as what it is, you'll enjoy it. It'll be a lot of fun for you. So if you did like this video, go ahead and check out my Ghostbuster playlist, where I do reviews on other Ghostbuster material, props, and action figures. And put in the comments and let me know if you want me to do review on the other Ghostbuster movies. If you do, I'd be happy to do them. I might even get Billy to do 1 or 2 of them with me. So if you like this, let me know if you liked it. Let me know if I talk too long. I don't normally do movie reviews, but I've been a huge Ghostbusters fan forever, so I really wanted to review this movie. Hopefully next week, Billy and I will be doing a review of Godzilla X Kong. So if you're interested in seeing that, I'll be putting that together probably next week, so it might come out in a week or so or whatever. So also, if you did like this video, hit that thumbs up, share, and subscribe. They're small clicks for you, but it really helps this channel grow. So until the next one, late.